Cool. Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Orla Sadir from the Men's Development Network. Thanks so much for joining us today. Before anything else, I'm just going to hand over to my colleague, Mark, who will be looking after us tech-wise today. So he's just going to run through what's what on our screens and how you can interact with us today.
How you doing, folks? Thanks very much for joining us all. We're delighted to have you all. So just to let you know, you may not be able to see all these buttons, but I'll run through them. On the top left, for all of those people who haven't used Zoom, if you've been living on a desert island or something, on the top left, we have a little green shield, and that allows you, if there's friends of yours that haven't registered for the event yet, you can copy the link there and send it to them, and they can come in and join us over the next 90 minutes. Also really helpful, on the top right hand of your screen, there's 3 dots that are in a square with the view button. And if you press on that, that allows you to go to speaker view so you can see me filling your screen. Or if you would rather, which I recommend, putting the gallery view, and that allows you to see all the panelists together for the day. So down on the bottom of your screen then, if you're on a laptop, I know on a tablet or things like that, it'll be a little bit different. But on the bottom, there's mute and the video buttons for you to switch on and off. Participants button, as I see it. I think for most people on a webinar, though, you will just have the questions and answers button, a chat button, and the raise hand button. So if you'd like to, maybe in the chat button, just chat away to people, tell us where you're from. Be mindful that there are 2 ways you can chat. One is to just the panelists, and another is to all panelists and attendees. So if you want to type in there who you are or what part of the country you're from and things like that, or what country you're from. Of course, we have an international audience today, so we're very, very happy to have you all here. And there can be a chat there. If you have specific questions, however, to the panelists over the course of the debate, we would ask you to use the questions and answers button. And we've enabled it so that people can actually vote for the more popular questions. Of course, we'll try to answer all questions, but we may not be able to get to all of them live. But what we will do is that the panelists will answer them privately or by text as such in that. So we can have a little bit of a debate there, hopefully, and that will keep us all happy. We will have 1 or 2 polls at the beginning and at the end. But other than that, I think that's about it. Myself and Jamie are just going to be here in the background, like silent ghosts, trying to make sure you're all okay. So the best of luck with the debate, and I'll talk to you later.
Thanks very much, Mark. So yeah, welcome again, and thank you for joining us. So this is the final event of the week of visibility of sexualized exploitation, and that's been running all this week. We've seen a really amazing series of webinars and panel discussions hosted by our co-organisers. So they are Unison and MAN in Sweden, the Crisis Centre for Women in St. Petersburg, Russia, and the Gender Violence Institute in the States. And they've allowed us to hear from some of the main experts in the field. We've heard from survivor leaders, researchers, people involved in specialised women's support services, as well as from organisations like our own that are working with men. So yeah, our hope today is that our contribution here will complement and add to what's come before. So the purpose of this week and the events was to so we're 5 organisations that are members of the Men Engaged Network, and we've come together to raise the issue of sexualised exploitation. And when we say sexualised exploitation, what we mean is sexualized exploitation occurs when a person achieves sexual gratification or financial gain through the abuse or exploitation of a person's sexuality. And the reason why this is a problem is because this type of behaviour denies a person their right to dignity, equality, autonomy, and well-being. So we've come together to talk about its causes, the consequences, to discuss men's accountability and engagement in combating sexual exploitation, to share experiences and best practices of its prevention, as well as support for survivors. So as to why the Men's Development Network wanted to be involved in this week of visibility and felt it was important, study after study has demonstrated the highly gendered nature of the commercial sex trade, with those trafficked and sold being predominantly women and girls, and those buying the demand side defined almost entirely by the actions of men. So while it may be a minority of men that participate in the actual sexual exploitation of women and girls, the highly gendered nature of the commercial sex trade and the exploitation and violence that it often facilitates are, we believe, rationalised and legitimised by broader social structures and beliefs about what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. And this is backed up particularly by a recent study that was done in the US that was called Who Buys Sex? And the main finding of that study was that normalised beliefs about the commercial sex trade were one of the main drivers of sex buying, and that these normalised beliefs combined a series of interrelated ideas. And these are that prostituted women enjoy the act, that it's mostly a victimless crime, buyers are merely taking care of their needs, and they are just guys being guys. And I suppose as an organisation working with men whose focus is on transforming masculinities by supporting men to critically engage with gender conditioning, we have a responsibility, I think, to change these normalised beliefs and to engage in work around men's accountability and combating sexualised exploitation through ending demand. So that brings us to the topic for today. So we decided to approach the issue of sexual exploitation in relation to male bonding. We kind of want to look at the role that sexual activity, particularly sex buying, and that women's bodies play in male bonding and masculine status building among groups of men. So before I go any further, I suppose I just want to clarify like what this is, what this event is and what it isn't. It isn't a lecture. We're not here to denigrate men at all. It's quite the opposite. When we talk about like toxic brotherhood, this again doesn't apply to all male friendships. There's nothing inherently toxic about men or how they relate to each other. It refers to, though, male friendships or platonic relationships between heterosexual men that are limited, governed, I suppose ultimately corrupted by harmful gender stereotypes. So societal and cultural rules about what real men are and how they should behave. And I suppose the hypermasculinity underlying these kinds of bonds between men requires the sexual subordination of women to men. It demands sort of the dehumanization and objectification of the other. And also involved in it is a rejection and denigration of anything that's kind of coded feminine. So today, I suppose we want to come together in the spirit of the work that we do at the Men's Development Network, which is supporting and creating spaces for men to come together to critically engage with gender conditioning, those societal rules about what it means to be a man, to create spaces where they can identify how these rules may actually be harming them and others, that maybe they're cutting them off from their authentic selves as well. And we also like to create spaces and opportunities to consider, model and actively kind of step into healthy masculinities that are relational in nature and value the other. So we invite you to come along with us today and join us in having this important conversation. So with that in mind, and before I introduce you to our lovely panelists who you can see here, I'm going to ask you to take part in a poll, and I'm going to ask my colleague Mark, that was just there, to launch. If you wouldn't mind doing that when you get a second, Mark. Brilliant. So as you'll see here, this is a quote from Peter Quailitine. If you were at some of the events earlier this week, he was actually a part of, and he has a lot of experience in this area, but this quote is from a presentation he gave on male bonding and review boards. And so basically, we're just asking you whether you agree, somewhat agree, whether you're not sure, somewhat disagree, or disagree with this statement. So the statement is, sex buying has everything to do not only with men's ideas about what it means to be a woman in the world, but with their ideas about what it means to be a man in the world and their connections with other men. So we just want to see what you think. So I'll give you a second there to vote. So we have a lot of people who strongly agree, okay? Brilliant. Cool. So we're going to check back in. You're still voting. Excellent. Okay. Yeah, I think so. You've 59% agree, 32% somewhat agree, and 9% are not sure. So we'll come back to you on this later, and we'll see if this has changed at all.
Yeah, we'll leave it up for a short while because there's only 2/3 of the people have voted so far. So
Cool.
we'll leave it open for a while and just see how that goes. And we'll do another poll near the end. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so I guess we'll move on to introductions. So I'm very excited to introduce our panel to you today. We're very lucky to have them on board. So first we have Mia Defoice, who is a survivor leader. She's a policy advisor. She's a tireless advocate and an activist for those who have and continue to be sexually exploited. We're lucky enough to have her as a board member of the Men's Development Network, and she's also the coordinator of the Beyond Exploitation campaign. So Mia, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself, if I haven't told too much, and why you're interested in being involved in this today.
Yeah, well, like I say, my name is Mia Defoice, but today, really, I'm here as a survivor of prostitution and an advocate, and why to explain what that word was like, and see if I can answer any questions. And not so much a policy advisor as such today. I hope to bring in, what life was like. I exited prostitution 10 years ago, and I just couldn't justify what I had witnessed, not only my own experience, but what I had seen. And Ireland was reviewing the prostitution law, so that's why I joined that campaign to change our law and to criminalise the purchase of sex, which we achieved in 2017. But there's getting the law, and then there's getting all the implementation and everything else that goes with it, like exit routes, and then this conversation, because prostitution affects a society and how men and women, and it's a major block to gender equality if it's allowed to continue. But there are reasons for that. So today, I really hope to explain, or try to, not from a theory sort of, but really from my own experience and how laws, etc., play out in real life. So I'm super excited and honored to be on the panel with these three men. I really am. Prostitution in the commercial sex trade is usually, viewed by a lot as a women's issue. And I have always believed that no, it is a men's issue. It is men who benefit from it, it's men who buy, it's men who profit, and it is women who suffer the consequences of those actions. So it's incredibly important for men to join the conversation, and that's what it starts with, a conversation. So exactly. I'm delighted to be here.
Brilliant, thanks so much. We're so excited to have you. And next I'm going to go to Ben Grogan. So Ben is the owner and operator of Grow Fitness. He's a fighter and he's a member of Champion Martial Arts Gym. So Ben, if you'd like to tell us a bit about yourself and why you wanted to be here today.
Hey everyone, how are things? So the biggest thing there was I was dreading following Mia. She's just the one speaker. She's doing so basically, I'm 42 years of age. The reason why I wanted to get involved in this was because, like, for the first half of my life, I had friendships, and I had groups of people that I hung around with, like the whole the masculinity thing. Like, people see it in different lights, and I seen it in the first half of my life in one light, and then basically I got involved in combat sports and in champion martial arts and contact sports and all. And then I seen it in another light altogether. And not only with men, but with women as well, like with everybody training together and going through all sorts of adversity together and accomplishing something wonderful together, And it comes from that. It comes from struggle, And so that's why I wanted to get involved. I wanted to just have an open discussion with somebody, and I wanted to actually be somebody that So there's probably a picture painted of somebody that gets involved in combat sports, and people have an opinion saying this person here is somebody that just is in it for violence and all, but it's not like that at all. Like, it's a really, really healthy environment to be in terms, and especially with when you're talking about groups of men and how they bond together and all, like, I think that it'll show in a completely different light, you know. So I was delighted to be asked to be involved today as well. So thanks a million for having me. Brilliant.
That's great. And that's definitely something we'll talk about later on as well, is the martial arts. And next I'm going to go to Mark Casterdy. So Mark is the owner and operator of Champion Martial Arts Gym, and he's a coach there too.
Hey, so
Hi,
yeah, how are you? Well, initially, me and Ben were running up the Dublin Mountains. We were doing a trail run, and we have done some talks before on different things. Some things linked in with this, more about the culture of masculinity and in with schools. So I wouldn't be unlike Ben to throw me a curveball and say, fancy doing a talk here. And I remember running down a mountain, and he said to me, would you like to do a talk? And I said, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. What's it on? And he said, sexual exploitation. And I nearly tripped because it was the last thing I expected him to say. And then I thought, okay, so we were running around for about 2-3 hours around the mountains, and we talked. And by the end of it, I was sold. And then what really got me on board after that was when I met yourself and Mia, and we had an impromptu conversation that lasted about 3 hours, and you guys went on longer, and there was no. And I felt I learned something from that. And I felt that I could contribute something to that. So I was excited to kind of get on here and give an opinion on a few different things and what we do as fighters and coaches, and how that may help the psyche of a young male and how he grows into the men of the future. And then I learned a lot from that talk. And, you know, I'm still looking forward to Mia's story later on. But that was me. I was sold. Ben had sold it to me, and Mia had closed the sale. So.
Brilliant. And last but not least, Paul O'Brien. Paul is an Irish amateur boxing and kickboxing champion, and he's also a member of Champion Martial Arts Gym. So Paul, if you want to tell us a bit about yourself.
Thanks very much. Hi all. I'm Paul, I'm 28. Like it was introduced there, I don't think there's much more to say other than Ben did approach me and say we were going to be having this talk today, and I'd already explained it to Mark, and he was on board. So I was really interested in the topic altogether. You know, I think discussions like this are very important. You know, to have it in an open area, free flowing, safe space where you can really discuss the issues from every angle and really get to the core of the problem. I think it's very important. And one of the bigger sides of this I saw was sort of developing it from a young age with men. You know, really getting to talking to men as they're growing up and getting them at those vital ages when they start making these kind of decisions on what they think is sexuality or what their place is in this world as a man. So I thought this was kind of very important and a great way to get the topic going, you know.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. Yeah, we're so excited to have Paul here. So I think we start maybe our discussion around the kind of first half of the title, which is around that sort of the exploitation and that sort of idea around toxic brotherhood. And so I suppose my first question for everyone here is just growing up and around, and I suppose amongst groups of lads myself, it kind of always seemed to me that there was and is a significant relationship for heterosexual teenage boys and men, obviously, between their sexual activity or their perceived sexual, so what people think that you're up to, your sort of sexual prowess and masculinity, what it means to be a man. So just from your experience, do you think that's kind of a fair assessment or fair to say?
Yeah. Well, I suppose for me anyway, growing up in the formative years, your teenage years, you're trying to find your own sexual identity. And you might have markers there, and it might be the first time you kiss a girl, or the first time you have sex. So that is something that you're kind of building up towards. Now, I think where it either steers left or right, whatever way you go, is down to the group you're in. So if it's in a group, and really who controls that group, the peers in the group. So what I found is I would have had friends, and I would say I would have went left. I would have went to a healthy masculine direction. Unfortunately, I would have known friends that would have went right. And it's a continuum between left and right, but I would have known the extreme of the other side. And there's an overwhelming intersection between the guys that went right and the guys that went left. They were either the peers in the group that led it that way for different reasons we'll probably drill into, or they were led down that way, and they had maybe an unhealthy perception of the female the female body or the female persona, or even any type of maybe a lacking of a strong female character in their life, or a peer, a lack of a female peer that they didn't see. So for me, I think I fell in with the right group. I think sport was a huge element of that. My family unit, it's not the ideal family unit, but it obviously taught me to treat women with respect from a very early age. Sports reinforced that. And then this snowball effect happened, that I met more people with similar mindsets, and I met the right peers. So for me, it was about the group and the peers, and we had a shared belief system.
Yeah.
That was my experience.
I would have had it quite similar growing up now. You kind of sort of thinking about it when you were growing up. At quite a young age, I grew up in a mixed school, so I kind of had men and women, or boys and girls, growing up in the same class. So you didn't really have that kind of separation. And then I find as you started getting a bit older, the separation starts, and you branch off, and then it gets to the point where you say going on nights out, you're out with the lads for a few drinks, and the idea is, a part of it is to go out on the pole, and there's a bit of that kind of energy around the place, and very similar to Mark, you'd have kind of a couple of lads in the group that are going one way. And because of that, they'll start sort of looking at the lads that aren't following with them. And there can be that element of pressure, as you say, like a bit of peer pressure coming in, where you're the only one that's not taking part, or, per se,
Yeah.
I was actually talking to my girlfriend Sarah there. Sorry, I had to say fiance. She'll kill me. So I remember talking to her about this, and one thing we talked about was, does anybody ever heard the story about the person that goes away on holidays and said, I came home and I kissed a girl, and never happened at all. Like, the sort of thing like that. Like, I definitely lied about the first time that I kissed a girl, and I lied about the first time, like I told people like that I had sex earlier than I did. I was 19, I think, the first time I had sex. Like, but I think I was telling people like for a year or two, but it was the pressure of the group that I was in, And I think that's a big thing as well. That's where the toxicness comes into in a group like that, or a group of lads, like, that's where it only starts. I don't know how many times I've heard that story over the years of somebody going away and going, oh yeah, it was when there's nobody around, like, I kissed a girl there and all the sort of stuff like that, and it's all because of the group setting. And I grew up. I'm one of 9 kids. I have one sister, and she's the oldest, and she definitely is somebody that gave me my first respect for women. She because she raised us as well. Like, she definitely helped my mother. Like, I had 2 wonderful parents as well, like that. But she definitely helped my brother with a younger brothers. Like, she really hardened us. Like, and she had to be, because we're all crazy. You know what I mean? So like, but like she really did. She ruled with a stern hand, and she had to, like, and that was my first experience of. And ever since then, I'm really old-fashioned and that sort of way. That I've always had great respect for women. Like, and I hope I have nieces and nephews, and I have a daughter myself, and I want men to respect her as well, and I want her to respect herself, and want my nieces and nephews growing up as well, and I want all them to grow up as well with a healthy view of women,
Yeah, absolutely. And so then, like, it seems like other men's like judgment about your sexuality, or the perceived maybe sexual activity you're getting up to, is a kind of important thing amongst men as a group.
It's certainly a status. All right,
and so can I ask you then as well, like, what was the attitude then, like, amongst your peers, like when you were growing up, and maybe even now, to sex buying? Like, do you think it kind of rings through with maybe one of the quote that I listed, or, like, about it being maybe a victimless crime, and that buyers are taking care of their needs, and that they're just guys being guys?
Well, in preparation for today, I would have looked at to educate myself, and to challenge my own assumptions, and to see where I stand, because I was in a constant state of learning. So what I found interesting was, like, in a study, I think the Guardian paper in 2010 done a study. I think it was 700 people across 6 countries that had bought sex. So heterosexual men that had bought sex, and the demographics, to try target a demographic that primarily do it. They couldn't do it. They couldn't pick a nationality. They couldn't pick an age group. It was men of all ages. And they couldn't, and when they went to drill into more questions, to get into the psyche, I suppose the biggest separation was men that were doing it because they were lonely, and they generally found that was a connection, a childhood connection or trauma, or a lacking of a link with a female link in their early years of their development. And then the second ones, and more disturbing to hear, were people that felt a sense of ownership about buying. I would have known guys again in both camps over the years. For me, so I'm from Tala in South Dublin, and there would have been a very high rate of pregnancy within secondary school. So sex was quite prominent, and you found that you were either the kid or the teenager that was quite shy. And I very similar to Ben, I was very kind of late when it came to dating and things like that. But again, there was other people that, there was girls and there was couples together at the age of 16 having kids. So depending on what way you started off, you cannot unfortunately have to feel like a trajectory was set from certain decisions made, that you would see there was a lot more sex going on with certain people. But definitely it's, I remember thinking that when I came into sport and I started to travel away, that I started to realize that some of these friends that we absolutely separated away from were definitely on a path, and they would have used prostitutes. I actually did contact one or two old friends, and they would have nearly mirrored that exact polling information. So some were either lonely and they felt empty afterwards. I didn't have anyone agree with the second one, the more disturbing one. And I think I was hoping that'd be the case, but I wouldn't be naive to think that isn't a possibility. But that would have been my experience.
I think there's a huge percentage of people, men, that don't realize what they do. In terms of people making conscious, saying, do you think that it's a victim's crime? I actually think there's an awful lot of people that do it for emotional reasons, And that's what Mark was saying there about whatever it is, it is a void there because of something that happened, I've gone to counselling. I've been in counselling for years now myself, and because I know that's why I know a little bit about this. And I was talking to my counsellor about sex addiction, and she was saying it's nothing got to do with sex at all. The sex is something that's used to fill a void of something else that should have been there in the first place. And they'll talk about people growing up and all not getting physical affection, the sort of thing like that, and that's where it develops a void, and that's where it starts. People using drugs, all this sort of stuff, and they grow up with this big void and all. And I really think that an awful lot of them, they do it, but they don't know why. They just do it because it's a reaction to an impulse, if you like, And I think that's a thing with them as well, because I've been around people like that have paid for.
I definitely think there's an expectation. There's definitely an expectation when if the guys I would have known, and I remember one guy. God, it must have been about 18, 19 years ago. He done it on his phone. He could purchase pick on his phone, because I remember I was fighting, and I just remember him just going, I can. I went, but we're in the middle of nowhere, and I remember just being surprised, thinking, and I wasn't a stranger to technology or the world. I traveled the world around, but the fact that in Ireland we were in the middle of nowhere, and he could click like he was going to Argos, and he could pick everything from hair color, height, all this type of stuff. And even that day, something obviously resonated with me, because I was thinking, I couldn't believe it had gotten that far, even at that stage, 19, 20 years ago. That was the real eye-opener for me.
I'm just wondering if you wanted to come in there on...
I just had basically I was in for 6 years, so I was bought approximately over 4,000 times, and the research on who buys us, it does tend to be middle age, middle class, and that was my experience. With regards to the loneliness, because that is one excuse that they give a lot. And I remember challenging it one night with a buyer, and we drove to the secluded place, and he handed me my money and said what he wanted. He said, "I'm only here because I'm lonely." And I thought, right, okay, well, I've got some time. I'm actually not in a rush back to the street, so we can chat for a while, and we must have spoke for about 30 minutes. And then I said, well, it was nice to meet you. It was nice to chat. You can drop me back. And he said, hey, so it wasn't about loneliness. Wasn't about loneliness. You know, there was something as well that they see it as a victimless crime. And I think most of the buyers, I think they block it out, because you couldn't go down the Burlington Road and look at any one of us. Most of us drug addicted, some of us emaciated, some of us homeless, you know, with not access to hygiene, etc. The migrant girls, very little English. You know, they very rarely look at your eyes, and they very rarely ask. They very rarely ask, because if they ask, then, you know, they might. But you couldn't just look at us if you were to line us up and say that we were a healthy, you know, women, you know, that we were there. But they very rarely ask that question. That's, you know, they don't. It's like you when you're prostituted, it's like you cease to be seen as human, and you're kind of like this trapped mind that lives in a body, you know, that no longer belongs to you, because that's what they look at. You know, it's quite unnerving, really, when you're there, because they'll drive down or walk down and they'll check you out. Sometimes they get you to turn around, you know. And I always think it is about power, because sex, and there's nothing wrong with sex at all, and with the online and what's available online, you can actually link in with, you know, whatever sort of thing you're into, you know, with some people with similar, you know, whatever, wishes or desires. But so if that's possible, what are you buying? If you can do that without, then what are you buying? It is the power. And for a lot of the time, the more vulnerable women out there were more popular. And that always sat with me. What was that about? That's
what it seems. There seems to be this kind of false sense that once you accept money for the act, there's consent directly just given straight away. And I think it's just not understood. It's not explained that way. I think if everyone could hear how Mia just explained that, there'd be a different kind of outlook on prostitution altogether.
Yeah. And I think it's when it's viewed in that light as a service, you know, like going to a coffee shop or some sort of a personal service. And I always think, no, you know, that when a man picked me up in the car or asked me on the street and asked me to do something, you know, I didn't take it out of my pocket and say, yeah, here, there it is, that's €50. I went with it, you know, and all of me went with it, you know. And you know, and it's quite, but they are disconnected. And I think because we are out there, and then we know what the world thinks of us. So we often, like my name out there was Lucy. So Lucy, you know, wore the outfit, wore the wig, wore the makeup, and smiled. You know, I was the one that asked, did you want business? I was the one that was polite or whatever. But so that's, but there's also something when you're involved, is that when the world sees you as just what your body can offer, that's how you tend to communicate then with the whole world. Through your body, so you can get it. Sometimes you can get or become, and you don't understand why you're being over sexualized yourself, because that's what we know. That's what the only thing they want. It's quite, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose just following on, I know Mia, you had a bit that you wanted to share with us maybe today about just to bring it sort of back to like masculinity. Like obviously all this is important and ties in with the issue of masculinity, because a lot of the qualities that you're discussing there and the treatment are built into our kind of, you know, traditional forms, or those sort of hyper masculine forms, the ability to dehumanize, to objectify, you know, power being core to it as well. You were going to tell us a little bit about, you know, as we move towards sort of the idea of charting a path towards healthy masculinities, just, your experience maybe with men while you were in the sex trade.
I wanted to, because I was there for 6 years, and like I said earlier, men play a vital role in that. Like when I was in that for the 6 years, it was men who hurt and raped me and my friends. But that I didn't only meet those type of men, and I met some good men as well, and I think it's important because the vast majority of men in Ireland do not buy sex, are not online picking a white woman, a black woman, whatever. They're not doing that. So I think it's important. So I just wanted to say a little bit more about me and the few good men that I met. So I call this speech is from a few years ago, but it's called, I always name my speeches, don't I? It's called The Importance of Being Actively Honourable. I'll have to change some of the dates now. I exited prostitution 10 years ago with the help of a social worker, and I campaigned with the Turn Off the Red Light campaign to change the law, and we managed to do that in 2017, which made it a criminal offence to purchase another human being for sex, because that is what prostitution is. The reason I joined the campaign is because I had once been on a very different journey. I had gone from being a respected civil servant with a responsible job and all that goes with that life, and then my life with the help of some very bad decisions on my part, which led me to become addicted to heroin. And then I descended into a cruel and very disturbing world, a world I had only ever seen in the movies, a world I still struggle to understand. That world was prostitution. I spent nearly 6 years of my life in that cruel world, and I can find no justification for what I witnessed. The violence and rape that happens in prostitution is frightening and disturbing. I am a survivor of multiple rapes, including a gang rape, a vicious attack which my friend Jenny did not survive. And when you are exposed to such human wickedness, it changes the way you see the world. And any system or industry which allows the violent sexual crime of rape to thrive should be shut down. We shouldn't even have to debate it. I did want to just say that to acknowledge that the rapes happen. What happens in prostitution, that not all men, the buyers, that would have been their intention when they initially bought you. But what happens is that they have bought you, they've paid for something for you to do or for them to do to you. And it's not going their way. You know, and it's like when you buy something and it doesn't work properly and you bring it home, one of the first things you'll do is you'll shake it or you bang it against things. And the same principle applies in prostitution. So I firmly believe a lot of the buyers who bought for whatever that wasn't their initial. The same with the gang rape. Those men at the Christmas party, they initially wanted A, B, and C. They paid this much, and that's how it won. But a few hours of that mixed with a bit of cocaine, of alcohol, and that bonding that macho, some sex videos or whatever were on the TV, and all of a sudden when I said we're done, it's time to go, we're going to go, they said the atmosphere, I could feel it, the hairs at the back of my neck. And I looked in at my friend, and she was, because she had the few drinks, and I just knew, and one of them laughed and said, "You're not going anywhere." and then we were subjected. So, you know, that's something, because people often think when women are in prostitution or raped, that like men are going saying, oh, I'm going out to rape one of them. Oh, there are those who do that. But a lot of the violence, it occurs like that because you are commodified, because you have been purchased and because they have dehumanized you. So I just wanted to explain that. As we are here today to talk about men who care and why they must continue to do so, I'm going to tell you about a few men I encountered on the street that had a profound impact on my life. The guard. I had a very positive relationship with An Garda Síochána. I have always said that they were one of very few people who treated me as human, often showing support, compassion, and kindness. I will recall one such interaction. I was standing on the street when an officer I had got to know well walked around the corner. He stopped to talk for a moment. I thought he looked quite tired and asked if he was all right. He said he was tired because he had a newborn baby at home and he was very restless and he wasn't getting much sleep. And being on night duty didn't help. He said he just wanted to go home because he felt bad having to leave his partner at home to cope with the baby alone. I was thinking how sweet, but this officer always had a kind nature. We were all very fond of him on the street. Then he said to me, "You have a child, don't you?" I said, "I do, but she's all grown up now." "Have you got any tips for me?" he said. This question stunned me. I didn't know what to say, because was he really asking me, a prostitute, for parental advice? Most people wouldn't leave me in the same room as a child. Most people think I shouldn't have custody of my own child, let alone give advice. "Well, have you?" he said again. I smiled and told him to invest in a suitor and dip it in honey if needs be, that it had always worked for me. He smiled back and said, "We must give that a try." So he told me not to stay out too late, and he continued on his patrol. I stood looking at him as he walked away. I kept smiling because he had asked me what to many what seemed just like a simple question. But to me it was more than that, because he had asked me, a depraved one, a whore to many, a question in relation to the most precious thing in his life, his new baby son. That simple question gave me hope out there, gave me strength, reminded me I was human. Because the next man that walked around the corner paid me €40 to get down on my knees and open my mouth like a good girl. I have so much respect for the Gardaí, as it was the only thing they ever showed me. And it always annoyed me that the second man had more power over the first man. The man that gets up and puts on a uniform every day and takes an oath to serve and protect, but was never able to do so on that street. Our law in 2017 reversed that power. The second man is the milkman. It was a freezing cold night in November, about 10 years ago. It's about 12 years ago now. And it was the only night I had ever gone to the street and had not been purchased by someone, which had left me with no money. By 3:30, I knew I would be there till morning. I had enough change on me to get the bus home, but I would have to wait until they had begun. I walked into the driveway of the first house on the Burlington Road and hurtled up in the corner of a doorway. I tried to cover every inch of my skin with my long black coat. I placed my hands up the opposite sleeves of my coat and tucked it around my boots. I can't remember ever feeling that cold before. The shivering becomes uncontrollable and eventually your limbs go numb. But there's a strange stinging sensation as well. I tried to hum and remember tunes in my head to keep myself awake. I was terrified to sleep in case I didn't wake up. And yet I longed for that, for I knew the street was killing me slowly, and maybe tonight would be my night. After about 2 hours or so, I heard footsteps coming into the drive on the gravel. My heart began to pound. I tried to reach into my bag to get my pencil. I had decided after the last time I had been raped that if a buyer ever tried to rape me again, I would stick a sharp pencil in him. It wouldn't do much damage, but it would give me enough time to get away. But my fingers were too stiff and I couldn't find it in my bag. Then I heard a voice, a man's voice, but he spoke softly. "Are you all right?" he said. I must have had a panicked look on his face when I looked up at him, because he said quickly, "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm the milkman. I just want to know if you're all right." I told him I was grand and thanks. He asked me why I was there. I told him I hadn't made enough money and was stuck until the buses started, but that it wouldn't be long and I'd be fine. His voice got firmer. "You won't be grand. You're frozen solid. How much would a taxi be to your home?" I said, "About 20 euros. "Well, you stay there and I'll get one for you." I said, "No, I'm all right. You don't have to do that." He turned back around and faced me and said, "I'm not leaving a woman half dressed, frozen solid on a street like this. Sure, anything could happen, you love. Now don't move and I'll be back." The minutes passed and then I heard him call me. "Come on, love, I have a taxi." I got up off the cold steps and walked slowly out the gate to the taxi. He opened the door for me and I got in. He placed 30 euros in my hand. I said, "You've given me too much money." "I know." He said, "Stop and get yourself a coffee and something to eat on the way home." I said, "Thanks, but I don't know when I can pay this back." He smiled and replied, "Just get home and warm." And I never said I wanted it back. He shut the car door and I left. I stared out the window until I could no longer see him, and part of me didn't want to leave him. The milkman of human kindness, as the song says, because before we are anything, we are human. And the last man, the businessman. There was a businessman who walked down the street where I stood nearly every Friday night. At first, when he passed, he would just give me a polite smile, awkward at times. After a while, we began to exchange pleasantries. Then he started to buy me the odd cup of tea, and we'd longer chats. I learned that he had always worked late on a Friday night because it meant that he would have more time with his family over the weekend. He was always kind and respectful. He never asked me what had led me to stand on the street at night. I guess he had already concluded that things hadn't worked out so well for me, or maybe he felt that it was just none of his business. Either way, I was glad he never asked. With him, I could talk about the world, the news. He made me laugh sometimes. On the nights I didn't get to see him, I missed him. I missed the brief encounter of normality. I missed being treated like I mattered for 10 minutes. One night, as he was coming up the street, one of the girls approached him and asked him if he was looking for business. He politely said no and continued past. After we had spoken, I was so annoyed with my friend who had approached him. I went down to give out to her and told her she wasn't to approach him again, that he was different, and that more importantly, he wasn't one of them. I felt very protective of this man, that he should be shown the same respect that he had only ever showed us, for he was an honourable man. At times, I dreamt about speaking to his wife just to tell her how lucky she was, how much I admired her husband, how he could take 10 minutes out of his evening to pass the time with a woman like me, how he made me feel human and valued my opinions on things, and how lucky his children were to be raised by such a compassionate man. Whoever bought me on those nights, I didn't care what they did to me. I didn't care how much they humiliated me. I had a defense around me, and it was the knowledge that not all men think like you, that not all men treat me the way you do, that most men are honourable and good, but that some are actively honourable, and that one of those actively honourable men was my friend. So do what you want to me, because most Friday nights I get to spend a few minutes with a man of honour. Never ever underestimate the power of the smallest act of kindness. You see, my search in life has always been for the good. And I knew if I could meet the good on that street, there must be much more of it off that street. And if I ever made it out, I would try and find it. And I have, and it surrounds me today. I have and will always have a place in my life for good men. Men who have held me in their arms, wiped my tears, and helped me make sense of the world again. In fact, my life would be incomplete without them. And this is what it meant. This is what I meant by being the importance of being actively honorable. So I think it's important that I shake myself off a bit. I think it's important to acknowledge the good and to search for it. And when you find it, to surround it and to build on it. Because this issue is hard to tackle. It is hard for men to get their heads around it, for men, especially young men, to maybe stand up and say, well, I'm not so sure that I agree with this, or this is a good thing. I know that, you know, so it's important. And these three fine men, their voices is so valuable.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Mia. That was a really powerful piece. Thanks for sharing. I suppose like the common thread that like ran through all your stories there as well, like that really hit home is, like you say, those small acts of kindness, but the recognition of your humanity. And like, that's really what, you know, what we're trying to get at here when talking about those kind of toxic forms of masculinity, or whatever you want to refer to, that are based upon this denial of the humanity of others, and the need to dominate and exploit and dehumanize. But what we want to get at now, I suppose, is these honourable men. How do you become actively honourable? What does that look like? So I suppose just to open it out to Mark, Ben and Paul, I suppose if you were to kind of describe like a healthy or positive form of masculinity, obviously Mia's story there have outlined examples of that, but what does that look like to you? Like what are the qualities that a kind of healthy masculinity involves?
Well, that story is, you know, it's a tough listen, and it's inspiring at some stage. Like how anybody could have that type of objectiveness at the end of that journey. I don't know. I can't think of anyone to hand right now. It's an impressive level of humanity that I think is nearly unparalleled, to go through that and to come out the other end and still have a direction and a positive outlook. So that's amazing. Yeah, wow, what a story. It's I think to cultivate a healthy masculine bonding culture, from when we get young kids in, it's about the core values. How do they have core values? How do they act upon them values? And are they around a support system? When we get kids in, it's great. We can direct them in certain areas. You will find some kids come in and, you know, you can't do a lot with a kid if it's only once a week, but it's something. If you can give them some type of belief in something, because you don't know what home life they're coming from, you don't know where they're coming from. But like as Mia's stories, as we heard Mia's story, anything is possible. We can, you know, if you're passionate about coaching and teaching young kids, young boys, and you know, I would thoroughly believe that the young kids that come to us today are the future of tomorrow. And I see a cultural shift towards the way myself, Ben and Paul think. And I think after the first time we had talked, I think we were all nearly in full agreement. We all fully agreed in the direction we were to go. And as Ben was saying, it's about, and me, about just having this open conversation and talking to teenagers about sexuality, the expectations to be a man, to be a woman. I do see the cultural change. I see younger kids nowadays adopting a more forward-thinking persona, and that, you know, it's great when you see things like that. It's fascinating when you see that. So I do see a change. The problem is that these big social changes always happen slowly. That's just the nature of the world. So I think our goal is to nearly create momentum, and the more momentum, it'll just keep going and going and going. But yeah, that's. I don't know what you guys think.
That's exactly it. That's exactly the way I'd look at it. You know, we really need to tackle these issues at a younger age and at an earlier age. Because for me personally, growing up, I might have had one talk with a school in primary school, and then maybe one talk again in secondary school. And that never really related to the ideas of consent, respect, any of that. It was literally just your meat and potatoes. This is sex. This is what happens, the biological side of it. But there was never really that idea of the physical connection. You're not really exposed to rejection as a young man. You're not exposed to any of this kind of activity. So I feel that if we can kind of show men from a young age, like, because I had a very healthy upbringing, like my father, my grandfather, all of them always told me, respect women, look after women. This is the idea of it. And then kind of growing up, you start coming up with these kind of ideas that I want to be the provider, I want to be the person that builds the home and everything. And then as you get a little older again, you start realizing that it takes two people to do it. And I think the earlier you can put this kind of idea into young boys' heads, young men, there'll be a more respectful future, and it'll just happen naturally. But we really do, I think, have to tackle it from a younger age with men, because you're just kind of put out into this world. You have an idea what sex is, and you kind of know what you want to get out of it, but there's no kind of understanding of what the actual relationship behind it is. And how you can do it in a healthy environment.
I think so I was just thinking as you're all talking, you know, I just see, especially like in martial arts here, like, you know, we'd be in the gym. I'm just picturing myself as you're talking there, like if I'm in the gym one of the days, and say for example the gym is full of people here. It's no accident that I'm here today, by the way. I purposely came to the gym here today because it's such a wonderful place for it to be a healthy area for everybody, like, you know. But the thing is, like, I was thinking to myself there, so I'm picturing there's probably about 20 people on the floor there and they're having a sparring session. Like, so there's men and women, people are different levels, different experience and all, like, you know. And it's a really wonderful place of that. Well, in my life when I was younger, it was always a group of lads over here the whole time of that. And then you'd go to somewhere and then that's where you'd mix with women. You know, the sort of way. But with here, when we're sparring, like, there's men and women on the floor and everybody gets out of a car, and it doesn't matter what car you have in the driveway. That doesn't matter at all. You go in and you put on your gear, and you show your accomplishments by how much work you put into it. Man or woman, doesn't matter. There's people in here, there's women in here like that I spar, and I will not drop my hands, you know, like for a second, you know, and like that, like, because you'll get clipped, you know, the sort of thing like that. But that's actually, when you're talking about that, that's also the case in the kids' class. Because and I think that's a really, really good place, because the kids start developing relationships with girls in this sort of ways like that, like, you know, that where they're sparring, and maybe a boy goes in like that, and then I can think of a couple of the girls here that train here, like, you know, and they go in and they compete in sparring and stuff like that, like, you know, and they test their skills and all, like, you know, and them lads go in and they are very apprehensive about sparring these girls, because these girls they've put the work in, they've earned it, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're saying, Ben, is really important. Like, so that it creates a space where boys come to see girls as equals, and you know, like, equally capable, you know, and like you were saying, Paul, you know, that we are reliant on each other as well. It's not simply men are the providers, men are the leaders, men are the fighters, men are the
exactly.
It's
I think
about rebalancing that.
As Mark was saying, that cultural shift is happening. It's just taking time. And I think with Ireland, like, we can be one of the countries that can be the way forward for, like, we can show people how to progress with this, and why not start with it? It has to start with a conversation somewhere, you know. This is the perfect environment for it, like.
Yeah, and so we just have a question there from Diane Martin, who's in the audience there, and she has said, as a survivor of prostitution and trafficking, it's greatly encouraging to see men engaging in these conversations. It's so important that men can be equipped to question and challenge other men as to the harms and reality of prostitution. So she wants to put to you, what do you think needs to happen to facilitate these conversations and then transform them into action?
I would say, because, and I remember Mia had said it to me as well when she was talking to her, we were talking about talking to teenagers, how do you get through to adolescents and young adults, young male adults? It doesn't resonate with them. You know, Mia is the most affected. She has lived through it. We're less affected. We haven't lived through it. We're only giving opinions and trying to give insights into our experience. And teenagers, more than likely, are so far detached from that. So what I would think is you find what they are attached to and you work it in. So if you were going into a school and you were talking maybe sex education, the simplest one, kids get a bit giddy, but it'd be worked its way into a sex education module. If you want, I would do a kind of a multiple approach. You would maybe take it into sport. Maybe every student that plays for a school team has to learn an etiquette and a code of conduct, and there has to be consequences. So you take it from a sport. So you've dealt with academic, sport, and then what I would say is you would have to tackle it socially. School discos, underage parties have to be chaperoned and watched, and you have to give like kids, let them expand, let their wings grow, and let them experiment, but within reason. They're still kids, they're not fully formed adults, they're still soaking up this information. So then socially, anything outside of school and sports, same again, they have to realize there's a code of conduct, and this is how. I think that, again, momentum built from 3 different sections in society is the only way. One tier will only get one demographic. You need to hit everybody and still accept there's people in that statistical group that will never conform. But you won't get 100%. We just need to get majority.
That's exactly. I think more stories like Mia's story. I mean, we don't hear enough of this, even growing up or even now. It's not something you'll turn on. Like, they'll tell you all day you should stop smoking because of this, you shouldn't drink so much because of this, your diet should be this way, but no one actually hears what actually happens when someone goes out and buys sex. And they might be a gentleman all day, but as Mia says, once something goes wrong or they don't like how something is going, they just snap. And I think more stories like that would give people a better understanding of when you're sitting around in the pub and the lads start talking about it, and maybe someone starts to crack a few jokes. You can be like, well, no, it actually is serious here. This is why. And more stories, more knowledge of what actually happens. It's very out of sight, out of mind kind of idea. As you said, you can walk down the street and see the women, but are you actually asking them how they are? What did you do today? Who bought you today? There's so much behind it that we just don't get to understand or hear.
Yeah.
One idea.
Yeah, I think as well. Sorry, mate. Just the technology thing is a big thing as well. I just say it. I actually talk an awful lot. My daughter's 8, and I'm driving around the car and all, and so first thing I've said to her is, don't even think about asking me for a phone over the next while. And there's no chance of her getting one whatsoever. I think early exposure to technology and all the sorts, it does sexualize kids, very, very quickly. And I'd always explain to Liliane, a bit, because I had actually one of my friend's daughters of mine when I said it to her, and I was saying, the way you go into technology and then you're on Instagram or Facebook and all, and then you get a compliment, and then you say, oh, that's great, so I got this really good feeling, and so, but it's coming from an external source rather than an internal source, and then what happens is they go along like that, and they post another picture, and then they get a few more compliments and more likes and all, and then this momentum builds up, and they start going, this is where my self-esteem is wrapped up. But what happens is, I was telling Liliane, I was like, what happens is then they get a little bit older and then they stop getting the likes. So what they start doing then is they start degrading themselves a little bit, and it might be wearing less clothes, whatever it is like that, and whatever the case may be, and I was talking to Liliane about that, and I was saying that this is why I don't want you near technology until I think you're absolutely ready. We need to talk about it an awful lot more, we need to know everything about it. We need to know that. I always say to her that this confidence that people has, that should come from inside and not from other people, and that's a really big thing. But with both men, with both boys and girls, I think their levels of self-esteem should come from inside them, because what happens is when you take the social media away and you're not getting the likes anymore like that, when you take that away, then what have you got left?
Yeah,
you have some issues.
Absolutely. Yeah, Ben, you're absolutely right. But that kind of brings in another point that I think Diane mentioned as well, and another person there in the chat bar, they're asking about, I suppose it's tied into technology, is what are your thoughts on the role of pornography in this, and how can that be addressed with boys and men, as it is one of the few or maybe the only information on what sex is, and mainstream pornography obviously is so violent, but like you're saying, kids have access now to, at a younger and younger age with their access to technology. So just any thoughts on that? I've a few thoughts on that. I think these conversations are fantastic because we walk the line of controversy, and that's where good things happen, when we push assumptions and we go back and forward, and and to realize something at the end, because I'm already learning, from people with more experience from me. But definitely when it comes to, say, pornography, we have to allow for sexual freedom. And I think the problem is, in everyday life, people are looking for the magic bullet, whether it's a fitness plan or an answer to a really complicated area or an idea or something we're trying to change.
And with pornography, you can't stop it. But what people have to realize, what young men have to realize, is it's not a tutorial. It's not something that is replicated. It is fantasy. Fantasy is okay for a healthy sexual relationship. It has to be explained. And this feeds back into what system are we educating them on. That pornography is okay, not at young ages. And that has to be weeded out through an educational system. But it shouldn't be used as a mechanism of information on this is not reality. It's fantasy. So once I think we aim for balance. So we say it's wrong, then you get pushed back. And you'll see off some schools, even in the last year, people pushing back on what kids are wearing in school. And it's nearly 50-50. Some people are saying kids should be able to wear what they want, going to a secondary school. Some people are saying, well, you can't do that in the office when you're an adult. Why can you wear whatever you want? And it's good, there's conversation, but it's polarized. So I think it's somewhere in the middle. Definitely kids should, as Ben said, technology seems to be the main instigator and the driving force behind pornography. But the answer for adults, and as they get older, more responsible, it should be, it has to, hopefully should have realized at that stage, it's fantasy, it can assist, it can enhance, but that's what it is, it's fantasy. And there's a level of maturity that needs to be had before pornography, I would see, is viewed.
Mia, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, there was a couple of things. But the pornography, yes, I think it is high time the tech companies took charge and children under a certain age were not able to access hardcore pornography at the click of a button. That's absurd, and it's highly damaging. There's evidence, scientific evidence, to prove that pornography at a young age does damage their brain as it's developing. Of course, you can't do research on that because you can't stick 20 children in a room and show them and see the effects, okay? But we know by what is playing out. We know that there is a massive increase on violence, sexual violence, and it's on children. So there's where we gain the evidence and the severe effects of pornography and how it plays out. With regards to prostitution, unfortunately, the reality is that there are a lot of people watching it, and a lot of what goes on it is hardcore, and it's violent, and it's degrading and dehumanizing, and it gets played out on prostituted women. And if I go back to the night of my gang rape, apart from how those men got to that position, with the talk and the drug or whatever, and what they did to us during that next phase when they were in that state of manic, whatever you want to call it, I could never make sense of that. And then when I got out and I looked at what was available online. And I remember going to, it said a gang bang or something, and I didn't have the sound on, but I remember just taking a couple of minutes to see what was happening, one woman with a group of men. And then my gang rape made sense in as much as it could. So, and the reality is they have high levels of mortality. They die of suicide, overdose, anal prolapses. And that knowledge isn't very out. A lot of the women that are online now in pornography had no say in what was put out there. There is a brilliant book written, I think it's called Pornland, which will explain. And a lot of the women that put online, there's quite a lot that are already dead. And those videos are still out there. So it does have effects. And it gets played out enough of those effects and things that people want to do are very often played out on women in prostitution. So Pornland, yes, Gail Danes. That's a must read for you, Guy. It's on put it on your list. Pornland, Gail Danes, Dr. Gail Danes. She's brilliant. And but she makes she would explain that a lot better than I have. But it is having But Paul, I wanted as well that men having these when we changed the law, what we didn't do is tell people, and we now have research that 70% of Ireland don't realise that this law has changed, or why it changed, or what it is, or whatever. So yeah, part of Beyond Exploitation and the next step is making that visible. And Mark's right. If you want to fix society, you have to go back to the nursery, as Plato says. You have to go back. You have to find a way in. If you find a way in, sports is brilliant, or some activity. If you find a way in and you build it up. So if that's
yeah, absolutely. I suppose I'm just going to maybe pivot back a little bit towards where kind of like, I suppose it's picking up what you're saying there, Mia, about like, how do we make a change, and where does this start? But I kind of wanted to go back to the lads and ask them as well about, we touched on it earlier, like masculinity and martial arts. And I know, Mark, you were talking about like codes of conduct and things like that. And, that it kind of provides a good model for other areas of your life. So, I don't know if you want to talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so like in the club, in Champion Club, there'd be quite a strong female presence, and always has been. That's a mixture of, it's organically grown that way. We would treat boys and girls, men and women the same when they come in, and it's just organically grown that you have strong female characters. And then when we've got new men coming in or new women coming in, there's no different. They're not being taught by as such a female coach or a male coach. They're being taught by a very skilled coach. So right from the get-go, the minute someone walks in, they're being taught by someone that is, I don't see it as being taught as equal. You're just seeing a really good coach, So by and large, we've set up a culture in the club that men will be set tight. So at one end, guys will compete in competitions and girls will compete in competitions. But about 90-95% of the people in the club are there for the camaraderie. They're there because primarily people come back to a business and a service because it makes them feel good. That's primarily in most services. So I like to think that the way people feel when they leave is the ultimate takeaway for me. And that has been done over just people achieving their goals, whether it was to get a little bit fit, to lose weight. But, if you drill down into that, people are getting fit. If you drive into why people want to get fit and why they want to, maybe if they want to lose some weight or they just want some interaction, it always comes from a very emotional place. So if someone is walking out of the gym and they feel good about themselves, happy about the experience they just had, well, then I'm happy. I'm over the moon. That's my goal. Profit is a consequence of that, but the goal is to actually make people smile, make them happy, make them feel heard, make them feel equal, and make them feel like they have an input in the club as well. So for me, that was always the goal, and I think we're on track. I think we're doing quite well for that.
Do you think it could have, like you're saying, like a wider reach into other aspects of your life? Like, I suppose some of the comments there were around like kind of pornography and that just the point you made around fantasy, there's a little bit of pushback, and in terms of viewing men viewing women as equals, do you think that like the experience that they have in the gym and that sort of stuff could alter men's perspectives in that way as well, where it's about like seeing women as equals, and that in some way
I suppose it depends.
Combat that.
I suppose it depends on what their default setting is. If you're going to come into the gym and you're absolutely prejudiced and biased, a few classes aren't going to change it. You've been shaped by peers and decades of different experiences. But if you're coming in and primarily if young kids or adolescents, you're still being shaped and molded. Not to say that you can't change the way you think or see people going forward, but definitely if you see a strong female, like we work closely with the 2020 program over here in Ireland, which was to get female athletes seen more. So we've adopted that in. We made 2 events called Unite, which was female only sparring day, run by women, only women attended for multidisciplinary sports. So we're huge behind that. Like if kids, young boys and girls, can see strong female leads, there's no way that they're not going to, like, why can't the young have a strong female role model, like an athlete, you know, in the movies? I see it happening already. We just need to see more of it. So 100%, I think we follow actions. We don't follow words. People talk a lot. We need to see change. So when I think, when I show these young kids strong female characters, coaches, leads, I know for a fact they're changing, and I know for a fact that they're going to make very informed decisions as they go forward.
It's also the aspect of seeing the positive male role model sitting back and not complaining that there's a woman in charge of it as well. You know, that's a major part of it, where you just be like, oh, she's obviously up there in the top. You know, there's never any of that carry on when it comes about, you know. And even through sport was how I met my partner. You know, we met at the gym, and we've been going strong, and she's a proud feminist, and I've actually learned quite a lot through that, just getting to know her values, her outlooks, and it's shaped how I view the world now as well, you know, and it's only made me a more positive man because of it. There was a lot of hang-ups around being a man that I feel led to sort of how I had sort of mental health issues growing up, and there was always just this pressure of being a man, not taking control of a situation, you know, like you protect a woman, this, that, and that. When you go into the gym, it's not that everyone is equal, everyone's calm, there's no ego, there's nothing like that. And it's just a place where you can relax as a man and let anyone take over. It doesn't matter who it is. It's just, that's how it goes, you know. And it's just, I feel like it's a more healthy environment for men to grow up in and men to see women flourish into.
I'm involved in champion quite a few years now, like, and I've actually seen, like, and it's because of that reason. I think it is because I've seen one or two men that come in, like, you know, and they start doing a bit of training and all, and then they they be trained, whether it's a female coach or whatever it is like that, or else maybe a sparring day or whatever, and then they jumped in and thought they were going to dominate the situation, and they didn't, and they're not here anymore. You know, simple as that, like, you know.
They're still alive, Ben. Ben will just go, they're still alive when he says they're not here anymore.
They're not
just not in the gym.
Yeah, but they got worked out skills, you know, and like that. And I honestly come in here, and whoever's standing in front of me, like, everyone's my teammate, like, you know, and they're not female teammates, they're not male teammates. There's none of that whatsoever, you know. That doesn't exist here at all, like, you know. And it's like, you'll see the same with the kids. If you've seen the kids training together, there's nothing like that at all. Like, there's no, you know, everyone is just, you get out what you put into it, you reap what you sow, and that's how it goes in the gym, you know.
Brilliant. Yeah, we're kind of coming towards the end now. I'm sad to say, yeah, we've only 9 minutes or so left. So I suppose I just want to go around you all and just what are your kind of final thoughts, or was there anything that you wanted to kind of share that maybe we haven't touched on? So I'll start with you, Mia, if you want to.
Yeah, start me.
Oh, I can start with someone else if you'd like. Would anyone like to volunteer to go first?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Ben, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so like in terms of masculinity and being tough and all this sort of stuff, you know, but like I'm somebody like I had a conversation with Mia, and by the way, Mia, I think I speak for everybody else to say I have bad news for you. I think we're all pals now, and you're not getting rid of us, just, you know, okay? Okay.
Fish.
Well, yeah. But yeah, like I was molested when I was a kid myself, like, you know, and I was a man and all that as well, like, you know, and I grew up very low self-esteem, all that sort of stuff, like, you know, and I only just started discovering life really kind of in my late 20s. So like I did drugs, I did all that sort of stuff as well, like, you know, and the reason why I'm saying all this is because if there's a man out there listening type thing like that, I want them to, like, you know, and I want them to know, like, that like, as a man, like, it's okay to seek help. It's okay to maybe go and see a bit of counselling or whatever you have to do. Like, do what you have to do, like, you know, and life gets better, you know, and with a little bit of work, you know, a little bit of soul searching inside, you know. I'm 42 years of age now, and I've never been happier, you know. And it's because of all of it. It's because of all the work that I did. It's because of the bit of counselling. It's because of getting involved in health and fitness, exercise. I only started getting to know myself then, like, you know. Like, before that, like, I didn't think much of myself at all, like, you know. And as I did then, I started training, and I started discovering that, like, you know, like you're only limited by your own ambitions, you know. And I suppose I just think if there's men out there listening, like, you know, that those groups of people that are getting you to do things that you don't want to do, like, they're no good, you know. And don't be afraid to say no. Don't be afraid to just leave them. Just get rid of them altogether. They're no good for you, you know. You know what I mean? I just think, and then get involved in martial arts, great. You know what I mean? Like, and you'll see, you'll no, I don't mean for any other reason, only like that. You'll just see a brilliant version of yourself. Like, you'll see a brilliant version of men. You'll see a brilliant version of women, of people, humanity, struggle. You know what I mean? All the sort of stuff, like all the brilliant stuff that you see like that, and out of it comes like the best version of yourself you'll ever see in your life. You know. So just go out and get some help and do something, and you know what I mean? Life is good, you know.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Ben. Would anyone like to go next?
Yeah, I suppose for me, it was humbling listening to Mia's story, very humbling, and there's a lot of takeaways to think about from that. And as I said at the start, you know, the power of a good conversation will get you to challenge your own assumptions. And just looking at some of the comments and looking at the book by Gail Dines, is that how you pronounce it? I will have a look into that, and I will read that, because you have to be able to challenge what you think and what you know. Otherwise, what's the point? What is change? So thank you for that feedback and that recommendation. And no, just that it was my pleasure to be in your company and on this webinar. So thank you.
Great. Paul or Mia, who'd like to go? Do you want to go, Paul?
I gotta go ahead there if you don't mind. Yeah, no, it's a brilliant conversation to have, and I'm super happy that you asked me to be a part of it. I definitely feel, and I've said it a couple of times already, but I would love to see these kind of talks and these kind of ideas being brought to kids in schools, being started from an early age as we can, and bring it up. These kind of conversations will work for people that our age are up, but if we can tackle it from an education standpoint, that it's just part of the curriculum that we learn this, I really do think it will lead to a healthier future. And that's how we're going to establish this, because you can't just stomp the fire out now. It just won't work with people our age. We need to have the backup behind us coming up, the reinforcements growing up through it, and that's how they learn to live. To get rid of this whole stigma of man up about everything, get rid of these false pressures that we just put on men for no reason at all, other than that we have this false idea of what masculinity really is, you know, and it comes back to really what martial arts does for us and what it does for men. It gives you that equality idea. It shows you struggle. It shows you don't have to be perfect all the time. You can fall down, but as long as you pick yourself back up and you learn from it, you're fine. It's healthy. And thanks very much for letting us talk.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Paul. And Mia.
I just want to say, it was truly an honour. It really was to be part, and because I know the lads, this was, it's new, and it was fantastic to have this conversation. And I'm delighted I have 3 friends, because I'm a bit of a Billy No Mates. So but I did want to stay, because now I know prostitution is highly gendered. It's mainly women and girls, and that is my main protection of women and girls. But I do believe in a world that where no girl should be groomed and no young boy should be groomed, and that's groomed either for sexually or groomed to be the next generation of buyers. I want better for them. Like Mark said at the start, he could go right, he could go left. We play a part in that, and like Paul says, through policies, through education, through, awareness, all of that stuff, so that we can live in a world that is more equal and more humane, because we're human, and most men have a significant woman in their life that they love, a mother, a daughter, an aunt, a niece, whatever. We play significant roles in each other's lives. We need each other. Ben has just asked someone to spend the rest of his life with him, and that someone is a woman. So we're more connected than we know, so, and sincere thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, everyone. It has been a really, an absolute pleasure to have you all here today, and you've been so helpful and enthusiastic the whole time we've been planning this, and I really enjoyed our time together. So just before we finish up, we're just going to go back to maybe the poll that we asked everyone at the start, and just revisit and see has anyone changed their mind?
So what I'll just do is I'm going to share the results of the last one, because I realized I didn't do that, so people could see what happened the last time. So that's, as you saw, we had, I think about 68% of the people had voted, and we got 54%, 38%, 8%. Let's see what happens now. Relaunch, is it relaunch polling? Hopefully. It's the exact same question anyway, isn't it? Yeah. So we'll leave that run, but I'm just mindful, just to say to people that one of the reasons I asked everyone to write in the chat bar earlier on is, and of course we wanted to see where everyone was from, of course, and get that, but we can only have a private chat with somebody when they've typed to us. So if you haven't typed in the chat bar, I can't private message you. And I noticed that there's a person called Malin Irhammer who had their hand up from almost the very beginning, the whole way through.
Oh.
And I looked them up online, and they are a professor. They've supervised in London University some PhD proposals around sexual violence and stuff like that. So I might invite Malin if they want to come in to just talk for a minute, if you want, because I suspect they might have something very useful to say here, hopefully. But just for future reference, and Malin, you're not under any obligation to speak if you don't want to, but here you are. And certainly if anyone wants to type in the message bar, if you're on a webinar in future, just type in something, and then the panelists can kind of respond to you in a more private manner. So I'll ask you to unmute. But while we're waiting, we'll see. Basically, I just wanted to thank everyone here. It's really what a great group of guys to know. It's really great in a kind of martial arts, that very masculine kind of, in all those movies we'd have seen, all the guys fighting and everything. Really, strength isn't all about dominance. It is about, kindness and being in your own space and allowing other people to breathe. And it's really encouraging to hear, allowing women, encouraging and allowing that space where women can be themselves as well and not being threatened by that. That's real strength. And I just want to commend all three of you for just really amazing stuff. A very brave thing to say there, Ben, as well. I've had friends, huge amount of women over the years that I've known that have had some form of sexual abuse. It's incredible. But several men have, it's often harder to say in a way, but it happens. And just really amazing. It can take a long time to come through it, but fair play, and just
the statistic is 1 in 4, I believe. When you talk about how many men, that's just, and how I found that out was I actually Googled it, and that was when I wanted to seek help a few years ago, and then I Googled it, and that was the name of the association, was 1 in 4. Yeah. And then the first thing I asked the receptionist was, "Is that what that means?" And she was like, "Absolutely."
It's amazing, but it's so hidden, because, as I say, I've had absolutely dozens and dozens of female friends who've opened up to me about it. I've only had maybe 2 male friends, and I've had a lot more than 2 male friends, so from that perspective. And just amazing, Mia, as well. What a journey, and thank you for being so brave. And so inspirational to everyone, and it's great to highlight, the positive stories, because it's so true. A small act of kindness can make all the difference.
Never underestimated.
Yeah, it's an encouragement to us. Yeah, it's an encouragement to all of us when we go out of here today. No matter who we meet on the street, to a small bit can make the difference.
Mia, could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Have you ever had anybody in your whole life ever say sorry to you?
That actually did something.
Yes, but,
people have said, I can't remember the last, I'm sorry that happened to you. I don't know. Jesus, it mustn't have happened a lot. I can't remember. No, but I'm sure people have said, you know, I'm sorry that, well, the people that campaigned with me, I mean, they said it by their actions. They stood beside me, you know, and they fought for the law, and you guys are here, and an apology in a philosophical sense, apology means an explanation. And I think people who have stood beside me the last 10 years and campaigned and fought very hard for this law, and now are coming together for the next part. So that to me is an apology. I don't need. I think. Prostituted women or formerly prostituted women, the one thing you must let go of if you are going to survive is the very fact that you won't get justice in the normal sense of the word for the abuse that has happened to you. So you have to kind of let that go. But people, I think, maybe it's not so much come up and direct say, but it's they stand beside me, and that's enough for me.
So I'll tell you, I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, and I know that everybody else here feels the same. We're all like very, very sorry that happened to you. We really are.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose we should probably, because we've gone past the 90 minutes mark now. Yeah. So the only thing I can do is, Malin, I have promoted them, but obviously they don't wish to speak, and that's completely fine. There might have been a question, or but let's share the results of the opening poll or the closing poll. So originally we had 54% said agree. Now that's up to 74%. And we had 38% somewhat agree. That's 6%. And not sure, 8% has now gone down to 0%. We do have less, of course, people answering this time. So it could be a bit selective. But yeah, that job done, I think, for this one. Absolutely.
And just to say to you, Mark, thanks a million for your support as well, and your help, and keeping us all taken over, and yeah, keeping us live here.
More than welcome. It was great to be part of such a really good discussion with everyone. It's really, we need a lot more of this, don't we?
Yeah. Hopefully we'll do it again.
Great. I have to pop to another meeting.
No problem at all. Thank you so much.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Mia.
Take care, everyone.
Like to wish everyone a very nice and enjoyable and hopefully good weather bank holiday weekends. So have a great weekend, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks for being with us. Take care.
All the best. Bye.